DiverSync is a weekly netcast where we talk about the world of scuba diving, fantastic diving opportunities, and some of the happenings in the underwater world. We also provide tips and discussions about scuba diving and get excited about upcoming dives and adventures. Learn how you can join us on our dives and become part of the program by following DiverSync on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, or by visiting our website at www.diversync.com.
Hello and welcome to DiverSync, the netcast and podcast for scuba divers. My name is Rich Synowiec and you're listening to episode 524. And I'm recording this on August 7th, way later than I wanted to. But I have had a really cool summer and really cool, lots of stuff going on. It's been weird and I'll talk about that in a later episode. But I'm kind of going to go month by month now when we go through episodes and kind of take you through what I've been doing all summer. And hopefully you find it as exciting as I did. So let's get started in May. So the last time we spoke, it was towards the end of April and I was getting ready to go to Truk Lagoon. And it had been a COVID casualty. It had been rescheduled. They took the first deposit in 2017. Signed everybody up, and it was mostly the same group that had signed up. A lot of them had moved off. A lot of them had moved into different areas. Some people went off the PADI route. Other people went off into cave diving. So it was an interesting group that used to be really tight-knit, but it wasn't as tight-knit as it had been in the past. So I was a little bit disappointed in that. But other than that, the trip was pretty darn spectacular. So I'm going to take you through it. So getting there really sucked. It was a long, long process. And what I did, because I stress a lot about making sure things are perfect and my wife stresses more, is we scheduled our airfare so that we had huge gaps of layover in between. And the huge gaps of layover in between is supposed to make us feel a whole lot better about it. And it did. And it allowed us to basically overcome jet lag. And so what we did was we flew, essentially we flew from home to, I can't remember where it was now, but it was like, I think it was home to Houston, and then we flew almost directly to Tokyo. I think it was home to Chicago and then directly to Tokyo. Now, when we got to Tokyo, that was a really long flight. And Tokyo, most of the people weren't going to Tokyo, and I couldn't understand why. Most were going to South Korea. I didn't set up airfare for everybody because there were so many people with points at this point that I didn't want to deal with it. But getting there on the Tokyo flight, we got there with about a 9-hour layover, giving our bags more than enough time to get there, giving everything I got some great Japanese food, sushi and sashimi and that. And then we went down in this huge airport to a area that was blank. Now we had about 6 to 8 hours to wait. So it was an empty part of the airport, so we just kind of slept. Well, I wake up to a whole bunch of people setting up cameras and stuff, and it is close to midnight local time. And what it turned out was that United, who we flew on, had never had a Tokyo to Guam flight. They had been trying for one for almost 15 years and had never been allowed. And this was going to be the inaugural flight. So here we are in desperate need of a shower. And we ended up being part of a big celebrity celebration. There were a bunch of TikTokers there, a whole bunch of people. We got our pictures taken. We got these really cool gift bags with little trinkets and tchotchkes and all that kind of stuff. But then that was flying it to Guam. Okay, so we flew to Guam, get there real early in the morning, decide to sleep it off, and we had gotten a 27-hour layover in Guam. So I really was excited about that because I was going to get to sleep. But we rented a car because I wanted to tour Guam. I'd never been there. It was the first of the Japanese World War II islands. I mean, I'm a huge European theater history buff, but I've never been really much of, up until now, but much of a Pacific theater World War II buff. But when we got to Guam, we had rented a car. So we went and ended up hooking up with one of the other guys that was there. And we all got on the same flight. It was all kind of cool. And then we went there, and Guam was spectacular. The first thing we did was find a beach, go and see the beautiful Pacific Ocean, and then there were these trees that were attracting butterflies, and they looked like the leaves were butterflies. That was pretty cool. If you're following me on Facebook and Twitter, maybe on Instagram, I had a bunch of videos and pictures from that at the time. But this beach was beautiful. It was really nice. We were desperate need of showers at this point. We couldn't get into the hotel, but we could drop off our bags. And so then we got back to the hotel, took a nap, and then we decided to wake up from the nap and then go and do sightseeing. And sightseeing was spectacular. There were World War II Japanese embattlements. There were guns, gun mounts, a lot of Spanish stuff too. I didn't realize that Guam had been conquered by the Spaniards long before it was conquered by the Japanese. So it was neat. We drove around for about 4 hours, and then came back, slept it off, got up, had breakfast, and then went to the airport. It was, and then we flew into Truk Lagoon from Guam. Now, the interesting thing about landing in Truk Lagoon was, other than it was super hot, was all of the locals with coolers as luggage. Well, it turns out that they all go into Guam to shop and to sell their stuff, and then fly back with all their weeks of supplies and stuff. Oh, that was something that was cool in Guam. Guam had the last remaining Kmart in the planet, and it had the largest selection of Spam I have ever seen. It was more like a PX than a Kmart, but that was neat to see, and just one of those little touristy things. But Guam was cool. And then we got to the island, and we drove to Blue Lagoon Resort. It was about a 5-mile drive to get to the resort, and it took almost 50 minutes because the road was that bad. And the Blue Lagoon, probably the most famous of the hotels on Truk Lagoon, because it has a dive shop. And some of my clients had gone there a couple days early to get some extra diving in. And so I could see that there was some coolness to that, to have to be able to dive. Those were little rickety boats compared to the livaboard that we were on. But the Blue Lagoon resort was probably one of the prettiest resorts and had probably the most potential, but the service was awful and the food was worse. And so it had air conditioning, it had a bed, and it had a bunkhouse, and that's all we really needed to get caught up to the day that we could get onto the boat. But once the boat had been picked up, once we picked up onto the boat, I was kind of glad that I never really went back. So we had planned on leaving right from the boat to head straight to the airport. When we go, a lot of people are coming back to the Blue Lagoon to be able to spend a day before they got on the boat. But we didn't do that. So we get out to the livaboard, and the Odyssey was parked on a dock that was like a real commercial dock with lots of container ships and exactly what you'd expect from a rundown ex-military base. But the boat was unbelievable. It had Starlink Wi-Fi. It had air-conditioned rooms. It had really good food, really spacious back deck, lots of really knowledgeable crew. We had a guide every time. But the coolest thing that the Truk Lagoon's Odyssey had was it had a lift. And what you did was, it wasn't a really bad back deck for those of you guys that might have gone to North Carolina and dove off the Olympus or some of the bigger boats, but that had this lift. And the lift, I don't think, is legal in the U.S. because it was set up in a really sketchy way, but it was designed in a really safe way, and I felt comfortable with how it was done. What you did was you swam up on it, put your feet on a graded thing, got your feet under you, and then you tapped on the you banged on the thing, and they hit the button and pulled you up. You're on handles. And so you're all clear of the deck and everything like that. And they got up on the handles, and it was, and then they would unclip your bailout bottles and get you up on the boat, or unclip your tanks and get you up on the boat and take off your fins. That was really cool. And the boat captain was a good old friend of mine from Morehead City way back in the day, and he's awesome, Captain Mike Gherkin, and the crew was just as good. And the briefings were really cool, lots of history, lots of videos, lots of a really good high-class, high-end feel to the whole thing. So I really enjoyed that. But let's take it into the diving now. The diving was a surprise at how much it was diverse. Being a Great Lakes wreck diver, we were there to go wreck diving, but they were more reefs than wrecks. The 70 years that they had been down made them unbelievably covered in growth. It was one of the most beautiful things you could ever possibly have imagined, as far as the growth was concerned. The other thing that was a big, huge surprise was that how much was still there. These things must have been protected from the get-go because there was a ton of stuff, and it was carrying everything you would need. All of these ships were Marus for the most part. There were a couple battleships. They call them Fizikis or Zukis. But the battleships were named something different. But anything was like a name Maru, like the Kobayashi Maru from Star Trek would have been a cargo boat or a merchant vessel, some type of thing. So they had a lot of different Marus that were on there, and they were packed full of stuff. The other thing that was interesting about it that was a surprise was how shallow everything was. You were hitting the decks of these boats well above 100 feet, and most were shallower than 100 feet to the bottom. With the exception of the San Francisco Maru, none of them were in technical depths. You could get 130, 140 on a couple of them, but you didn't have to. Most of everything that you saw in the superstructure was shallow. So I can see why people with single tanks go there and not get technical certified and have it be just as cool as it was. The thing with it was that we set up this trip to be a recreational trip, a tech-creational trip. So everybody was, the highest certification level when everybody signed up was Tech 40 CCR. Everybody else was advanced open water or deep divers and some instructors, but all that. But now, 7, 8, 10 years later, the trip had mostly high-end tech divers on it, with a couple exceptions. So the diving that we did was a combination of really, really long dives with very little decompression because of what we were doing. My favorite wreck on there was the Heinan Maru. The Heinan Maru was probably the biggest ship that I've ever been on. I'm going to say it's arguably the biggest ship I've ever been on that was that was not a warship. The Oriskany is still the biggest ship I've ever been on. That was an aircraft carrier. The Heinan Maru started its life as a Korean passenger liner, and I'm going by what the briefing did that I can remember. So it's kind of it might be a hodgepodge. Don't fact check me on this stuff. It was just cool. But the Heinan Maru was 550 feet long. It was a Korean passenger liner. It had been taken over during the war to turn into a submarine tender. And I don't remember what dive it was. We were doing 2 dives a day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And I got stuck on this one, which is one of the things that was cool. That was that was an interesting thing because it was weird. I was in a rebreather, and my depth when I got stuck, what we did was we went on a tour with a guide, and the guide was much smaller, and the people in the group were much smaller than me, and me and my camera couldn't fit through the hole that they exited out of, so I asked them to come back, and then they left me. But then they turned around, came back, and got my camera, thinking that was my problem, but then they took my lights. So thinking that I got it all done, then I went and pulled my backup light, and I had to signal them, guys, no, come get me back out. And at no time was I scared because I was in 65 feet of water with a fresh scrubber and full tanks. I got in there. I'll figure a way to get out. That's kind of the easy way. And the boat was so big that it wasn't like you were sleeping through little passengers. It just happened to be that I couldn't get through this door. And it was more the angle than anything else, I think. But when we got out, continued the dive, did another 45 minutes, and then at the end, we saw the coolest thing. I mean, this thing was carrying everything you would need to build a war, right? To fight a war. It had guns, it had bottles of sake, it had bottles of beer, it was all that. But the coolest thing that this one had that I don't think I'll ever see on a ship again was down one of the gangways. There were 5 or 10 spare periscopes for replacing the periscope on a submarine. I didn't even know you could replace a periscope on a submarine, but obviously I guess you can. So these were really cool. There was no doubt that they were periscopes. And there were no doubt that they were as long as you could imagine because they were like 60, 70 feet long. But that was cool. Another one that was cool that we dove. Oh, that one. That one was cool too, in that it was 550 feet long and it came within 35 feet. The top of the deck, it was laying on its side, and the top of the side was 35 feet. And that was covered with hard coral, like a coral reef. And so when you're up there doing your decompression a little bit deeper than 20 feet, you could sit and just go on a nice long tour of this reef and see all the little things. And people have brought artifacts up and laid them out there, some things like medicine chests and dishes and all that kind of stuff. But that was really cool. 115 feet was the max depth on that one. So all the way down to the sand was 115 feet. And so it was huge. It had a huge profile. But the next one that I can remember off the top of my head, and there's only three or four that I remember, was the Fujikawa Maru. Now, the Fujikawa Maru was an aircraft supply ship. And the reason that one was so cool was twofold. Number one, it was still full of aircraft fuel. So you had to be real careful when you came up into the hold that you didn't go up into the hold, because you could burn yourself on the aircraft fuel. And there were big barrels there still floating in there that could tell you, that they would remind you what it is. I went into the tool room on that one as a guide, and it had the famous compressor that looks like R2-D2. And that thing was, I've again shown pictures of it. You'll see them pop up on that. I'll probably have, that's probably going to be the one that I have as the cover photo of this podcast. But the R2-D2 was a neat thing in this air compressor room, and it was a tight fit getting in there. Once you got in there, the picture that everyone takes isn't easy to get to. You had to kind of back into a corner, kind of move your camera around without hitting up the silt, and then take the picture. So I was pretty happy to get a picture of it at all. But that was cool. That one was also carrying planes. So there's a intact zero fuselage in there. There was an intact zero cockpit, lots of landing gear, lots of parts and engines in that for the airplanes. And so that was really cool to see. And then we also did the I-169 submarine, one of the biggest submarines in the thing. It was one of the only submarines to get caught by the Allies when they did Operation Hailstorm that sunk everything, and that actually lasted a lot longer than I thought. They bombed the crap out of it for over a year, just to make sure that the Japanese never got a base back there for the Navy. But it was basically the Japanese Navy's Pearl Harbor, but it was mostly merchant ships, and mostly merchant ships under repair. Where most of the ships are what was called the repair harbor. They had a repair harbor, they had a Fifth Fleet harbor, and a couple other different harbors, and the repair harbor was there. But the submarine was running. It was under repair, but they got it running, and it couldn't submerge, and it was trying to get away, and they bombed the shit out of it and sunk it. So it's blasted, but it's really, there's no doubt it was a submarine. And lots of cool stuff. I mean, and then the San Francisco Maru. That's the famous one that's out there. It's called the $1 Million Wreck because there's so many people that have tried to talk about diving it. It's 140 feet to the deck, 200 feet to the bottom. Back in the day, I had friends that used to dive it on air with air decompression, bounce diving at 8 to 9 minutes, and they do 3 or 4 different things on it. But it was cool. There were tanks on the deck. There was a lot of superstructure. You didn't have to go deep on it, but we ended up doing about 155 feet on it. Just me and my wife on that one. But that was a really cool end of the trip. And that was the last wreck that we did. We did some planes. We did some other smaller ships. We did a battleship, lots of guns, lots of things that were there, lots of things that you would imagine war to be. And I'm still going through the pictures. There's so much to see there and so much to do there. It was pretty darn incredible. So that being done, the all in all, it was. I mean, I broke some stuff. We had people break some stuff. Everybody got home safe. Everybody got there great. But it was a great trip. I would like to go back. I would do it a little bit differently. Obviously, I wouldn't wait 7 years. I think that was the biggest thing that jaded me on the whole trip, is that everyone kind of had expectations of it being a tech trip, and they were kind of bent out of shape when they wanted Trimix and they had to pay for it, when they wanted Sorb and they had to pay for it, because I normally nowadays include all that in a lot of the trips that I do. So people who have done trips with me since they signed up for that and since they become tech divers were kind of bent out of shape. And so there was a little bit of complaining about that. But other than that, and it wasn't real public. No one got really upset about it. But it was enough that I mean, out of the 16 people that went, there were enough people that were hitting on me that was kind of like, man, how can I make this most spectacular dive? I mean, it sounds like you're not having fun. And no, we're having a good time. We just wish it did. I'm like, great. So next time we're going to do it, I will include everything. And have that all taken care of ahead of time because I can ship a lot of that stuff there. But I didn't expect COVID to happen, and I didn't expect COVID's cancellation to happen the second time. So that's kind of part of it, part and parcel of it. But when we got back to the boat, the boat had Starlink, which allowed me to be a lot less stressed because I could talk to my shop. And we could talk to people back home. I could talk to my family. I could talk to my dog. All the things that go with home. I was like, man, this is really cool. We've gotten really good at being connected, and I want to be connected for the rest of my life if I can do that. So later I'll talk about some of the stuff that has allowed that to happen, but on future episode. But that I'm recording today. But all in all, that was cool. So we ended up getting back to the boat. And the boat captain made arrangements for everybody to go who was going back to the Blue Lagoon. They had a 12-hour wait before their flight. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get on the flight. And so we pull into the dock. Everybody heads for the Blue Lagoon. Boat captain comes back and says, your flight's been canceled. You're going to be on the same flight as everybody else. And I was like, shit. Now what do we do? He says, well, I'm going to put you up in a hotel. We'll get you hooked up in a hotel. You can the airline's going to have to pay for it, so it's all easy. So we ended up going to a different hotel that was right next to the airport. Now this, from a standpoint of postcards, isn't anything near close to what you would imagine. It looks like more like a compound that's inside a industrial park. But you go inside, and it's a hotel, really nice hotel. The elevator was broken, but we never had to carry anything. They took everything up. They carried everything for us. They were really first class. And it was called Level 5. Now, nobody goes to Level 5 because there's no history there. There's no picturesque there. There's no Japanese embankments there. There's no ruins. There's no anything as far as palm trees and the things that are beautiful when it comes to the Blue Lagoon. But you have spectacular food and amazing service, and it was within walking distance of the airport. So we were able to go over, get our permits early, get our exit passes early, get everything there, get our bags checked right away with good breakfast in between. It was really, really laid back leaving. And so I think that if I ever do, and it was only like 10 minutes from the boat. So if I was ever doing this again, that would be one of the things I would change. I mean, Level 5 was a great restaurant slash restaurant slash hotel for what we wanted to do. So I was there. So I am going to go back. I think I need to. I need to rebuild my war chest a little bit. The trip cost me way more money than I expected it to, because we had paid for it, but things that I had to pay for out of pocket cost twice as much as I had planned for originally. So that was something. But all in all, I think it was great, and I would love to go back. I would love to do it a little bit differently. I might go back as a guest next time with somebody else, because I worked a little bit too hard on this one and stressed a little bit too hard on this one. So it is something that. All in all, I would highly recommend it. It was a bucket list trip for me. I don't need to go back, but I think that there are things that I would like to do differently that would make it a different one. So that was pretty much all of May. We were supposed to do a couple trips at the end of May. Those got canceled due to weather and boats and money and all that kind of stuff. And then because I had such a late start, I would have never gone on this trip in May. We had originally planned for it in mid-June. And what that would have allowed me to do as a dive shop owner is to have the quarry up and running, have all my ordering done, have everything like that. So there's a lot, and having all my internet, there was a lot of things infrastructure-wise. We're getting a new POS system. We're getting a new website. All of that had to be put on hold because it was a 3-week trip pretty much. It was a week to get there, a week there, and then a week to recover coming back from the jet lag was real. And I'd like to figure out a way to do that differently too. But all in all, great month of May and a good start to the year. But let's go ahead and talk about May and June. So we'll do that on the next episode. Let's cut this one out for you guys that have short commutes, and we'll get to the next one shortly. We'll see ya.
DiverSync is a cooperation between Divers Incorporated and Divers Media Group. You can download archived past editions worldwide over the internet at DiverSync.com. If you wish to support DiverSync financially, you can find us on Patreon for bonus content, announcements of live performances, product giveaways, and other opportunities to be part of the program. Help us promote our netcast by telling your friends and dive buddies to subscribe to DiverSync on YouTube and Spotify. The opinions that you hear on DiverSync are not necessarily those of any station, website, network, or advertiser. These netcasts are not intended to substitute for professional diver training. Scuba diving does involve risk and should never be attempted without the proper instructions, supervision, and training. Have any questions or comments? We'd love to hear from you. We are on Facebook and Instagram for messages, or you can email us via our website at diversync.com.